Market update time and a lesson in supply and demand economics and what's happening in Northeast Florida. Mike Rolewicz here, 904 Home Guide, powered by Real Broker in Jacksonville, Florida. So we're going to do a very quick rundown on what's happening in our local market. First off, as we always start, what's our median sales price doing? Duval, St. Johns County single family homes up 6.5% since this time last year. Interest rates are still high, prices are still rising. Stay tuned, we're going to go deep into why that's happening, especially in our market. So that $410,000 median sales price, new record high in our market. Interestingly, median days on market's ticking up a little bit. Our inventory is also rising. So we're sitting at 3.4 months supply of inventory. Still a seller's market, just not quite as frothy as it once was. We're seeing some of our listings sitting a little bit longer, getting plenty of showings, but not those offers right away. With that said, still 16% of homes in April did sell over list. So those turnkey homes that are priced perfectly or maybe a little undervalued are getting bid up and snatched up quickly. Our active inventory up about 8 or 9% since this time last month and 68% above last year. So that's a whole lot more choices for buyers. It's a whole lot of reason that sellers really need to get the pricing right, understand what buyers are looking for in our market, which could include seller concessions. We're seeing a lot of challenges still with insurance and repairs and roofs and water heaters. So that's it for the market update. I hope you find value in this. Stay tuned, as I mentioned. I'm going to do a deep dive. I went to a wonderful presentation with Alex Stewart of the Market Distillery last week, and we're going to look at how are prices still rising? How has a bubble not burst in Florida and in Jacksonville? So if you get value out of what I present, please take a minute, subscribe to the channel. Love to see comments and interaction, what you think is happening. But now I'm going to do a dive into what's driving our market. Number one, population growth. Since 2000, the state of Florida has grown in population 41%. 41% growth in those 20 plus years. So of course, supply and demand comes into play. There's more demand. Supply has not kept pace with that. The next graph is going to show what's happening in Jacksonville, specifically in terms of growth, as well as new construction permits. So then if we look at economic growth by county, what's happening within Northeast Florida? So it's interesting, Florida has grown almost 13% in the last 5 years, GDP. In fact, Florida's GDP is 4th in the entire country and would be about 17th in the entire world. That's how big Florida's economy is. But Northeast Florida, the 4 counties, well, the 2 that we do a lot of our work in, Duval and St. Johns. St. Johns is up 25% economic growth. Duval almost 14%, both above the Florida mark, and the U.S. economy is growing at 5.3%. So again, very positive news for Florida, specifically for Northeast Florida. Last month, I touched on a Wall Street Journal study that looked at what are the top employment markets. Jacksonville was number 2 in the entire country, and in fact, Florida had 4 of the top 6 spots. Interesting of note, if you dive deeper into that data, number 1 change in labor force size rank. So our labor force has grown more than any other market in the country. And then if you look at our payroll change rank, meaning wages, number 2 in the entire country. In fact, if you look at Jacksonville's median household income, it has skyrocketed 52% in the last 5 years, closing in on $100,000 a year. Back in 2017, that number was closer to $62,000. So again, if you think affordability, how can home prices keep rising? Well, incomes are rising really, really well in Jacksonville because of what we've become. We've become a destination for medical professionals, financial firms, logistics, high-paying, super solid jobs, companies moving headquarters here. There were 2 more announcements. The Atlantic Sun Conference is moving their operation from Atlanta to Jacksonville. Every week, every month, we're seeing new companies headquartered here, and we're reaping the benefits of that as a team. We've helped several employees from some large grocery chains recently find homes here in Jacksonville. We've helped folks with the PGA Tour. So we are still a huge inflow market. One more thing of note. So earlier we talked about 41% growth in Florida since 2020. If you look at just Jacksonville, 107 net new residents in the past 4 years. Problem is, we're about 50,000 homes short if you look at the population growth versus building permits pulled during that time. Again, it's just supply and demand economics. There's a reason our home prices have risen and will continue to rise. I know what you're thinking, but Mike, prices are at all-time highs. They have to crash at some point. So an interesting point on all-time highs. You might be surprised that 87% of the time in Jacksonville, people are buying within 10% of a 5-year high. So our market just continues to rise. Did we have a period where home prices crashed? Absolutely. Did we have 14 to 18 months of inventory supply during that time? Yes. Do we have that now? No. Did we have super loose lending standards? Barely any. Yes. Do we have that now? No. Just ask anyone who's applied for a mortgage recently what that process looks like. So the fundamentals of our market are rock solid. So another thing what we did is Alex pulled and said, in the last 44 years, we've grown on average about 5% a year. So what he did is he overlaid what's 5% growth look like against our home price index. Not surprisingly, leading up to the crash 2002 to 2006, prices were above that trend line, if you will. Then they were way below for many, many years, all the way up until 2021, 2022, when our market was super frothy. It's leveled off a little bit now, but if you look at our average price, we're where we should be price-wise, even with a 52% increase in household income. So to summarize, if you look at the underpinnings, if you really look beyond the headlines, beyond the scare tactics, beyond the talk of a bubble, Jacksonville is poised to continue growing. Florida is continuing to grow. And one last point that we'll make about this is time in the market versus trying to time the market. As we said, 87% of purchases are made within 10% of a 5-year high. So let's go back to 1980 and let's look at if you held a property for 2 years. What's the probability that property is worth more at the end of those 2 years? 88.4%. You'll see on this graph. The average return over a 2-year period, 11%. Now, granted, if you bought at the top, sold at the bottom, yes, you were going to lose money. Extrapolate this out to 5 years. Probability of a positive return, now 87.5%. Average return over that 5-year period, 27%. Now let's take an even broader view. When in doubt, zoom out. 91.4% positive outcome, positive return on your investment of a home in Jacksonville, Florida. And the average 10-year hold was up 52% over any 10-year period you picked. So again, I'm still bullish. I'm a big believer, time in the market, not timing the market. Personally, we just bought a condo for our daughter. I'm not going to pay rent. I'm going to find properties. The one we bought needed some work. It's getting renovated now. It's going to be a wonderful place for her while she finishes college. It's going to be a great investment for us going forward. So I always say, let's grab coffee. Let's go deep on the market. Thanks so much for hanging in there with me. We'll see you next month.